As motorcyclists, I think we can all agree the second best thing to getting an actual motorcycle is getting tools, right? And some of the most important tools you can get for your motorcycle are stands. A rear stand and a front stand. These ones are some of my favorites. You want to know more about them? I think you do, right? Come along. This is In Gear. These stands are from Woodcraft Technologies in Massachusetts, and this one over here is the rear stand. As you can tell by the spool holders here, this one is the front stand, as you can tell from the fork mount here. I'll get to the front stand in a second. First, let's talk about the rear stand. Basically, what makes the Woodcraft rear stand and the front stand so desirable, really, is because they're really well made and really well thought out. The crew at Woodcraft, they're racers, they're motorcycle riders too, and so they want to know, as motorcyclists, what other motorcyclists want to see. And there are some really cheap stands out there with wobbly handles and wobbly connections to the motorcycle and really tiny wheels. All of that does not make for a good stand because they're really hard to push up to get the bike up in the air. It's hard to align the spools with the carriers here. And with tiny wheels, it makes it really hard to transport and move around. The added complication with stands is look at this weird shape that they are. They don't really pack up easily. They don't really store away easily when they're not in use. So Woodcraft tried to really fix all those things with their stands, and with all their stands, let's talk about the rear one again. They're made from steel, they're made in the USA, so you're buying a homemade product. But then as far as the engineering goes, let's get into some of that. As far as the shape of it and the length of it, you've got a really long handle, so you can push the bike up from the rear and really get the bike in the air without too much effort. The really cool thing are these posts on both sides here. They're adjustable. You might recognize these clamps here from if you ride bicycles. These clamps, there's a pin you can pull out, and then you move the post up or down to get the height that you want for your motorcycle to get that rear tire off the ground as low as needed to take the rear tire off and then put the rear tire back on. You'll see the spool holder here, also adjustable for different widths of wheels, tires, swing arms, what have you. If your bike does not have spools on the swing arm, there are pads that you can just loosen the Allen head from here, remove the spool holder, and put these pads in its place, so you can just put the pads underneath the swing arm and raise the bike that way. You'll see there's these little prongs out the side of the handle here. These will hold your axle, your hardware. If you're pulling the wheel out, you can put the hardware on these prongs so they don't have to sit on the floor. And then you'll see these big, chunky 5-inch wheels. That does a couple of things. One, it makes getting the bike in the air a little bit more stable, actually a lot more stable than tiny wheels do. But also, once the bike is up in the air, or the wheels up in the air, if you need to move the bike a little bit forwards or backwards, having these big wheels makes that just a little bit easier. Now, let's move to the front stand. Again, same concept here. You have this a long lever for easy leverage to get the front of the motorcycle up in the air. Now, once we move up to the front here, if you're familiar with front stands, you will recognize there's a few different types. There's the types that go underneath your fork, like this one. There's also the kind that goes underneath your triple tree, which this is not. Woodcraft sells both kinds, but for the purposes here, let's get back to this one. A lot of similar concepts. You have the posts that can be removed same way with a pin, and the clamp, you pull the post out. What we have here is the front stand that goes underneath your fork or underneath your brake caliper if you have radial brakes, and you can lift the bike that way. There's also pins that come out from the center, so if you don't want to use the under fork style, or you don't have radial calipers, you can remove these pads here. You can remove these pads that would go underneath the fork or the caliper. And then there's an insert that would go on the top here that goes underneath the detents, or the holes underneath some forks in some motorcycles. So there's different ways to lift the front end of the bike up just from this stand alone. Again, you have the 5-inch wheels, the same steel construction that you find on the rear stand. Everything about it works really easily. Now, I've used plenty of stands over the years, from cheap ones to expensive ones, you know, of which these are up there in price. These are definitely not the cheapo stands you would find at, you know, a garage sale or something like that. It just takes one time using really crappy stands to accept the fact, like, buy once, cry once. These are solid. You know, they're not chintzy, they're not cheesy. The handles, you know, it's one solid piece, so they're not gonna be flimsy and like rattle around in your hands. The big wheels, just everything about the construction is really well thought out and really makes sense once you start to use it. And if you change your own tires or you do your own maintenance and you take your wheels off your bike frequently, the ability to adjust the height, how high or how low the tire actually comes off the ground just by, you know, loosening a clamp and removing a pin to adjust the height exactly how you want it, is a real game changer. It really sucks when you're changing a rear tire especially, but either way, when you have to like lift the tire up to put it back into the swing arm, to put the axle in, when you could, like, you gotta put your foot underneath the tire to keep it up in place and then put the axle in. With this, you can adjust just how high the front or the rear tire goes, so you're just lifting the tire or the wheel just high enough to get it into place with as minimal air underneath the tire as you absolutely need. Work smarter, not harder. As you can see from here, there's notches and detents to tell you, you know, the exact position that you have the post, so you can align both sides up to get the tire as little off the ground as necessary. So all in all, a really well thought out product. Woodcraft really takes their time to think about their products, not just these stands, but everything they make. Solid construction, really well thought out, and then they just work. They simply just work. And then what also makes this cool is you can take these posts out for all four, whatever stand you have, you can take these posts out, loosen this, take that out, take these posts out, and then imagine when you're not using these stands, what are you gonna do when you're done? You store them away, right? Other stands that have posts that are fixed and you can't remove them become kind of clumsy and hard to pack away. With this, you have a really low profile. You could hang it up on the wall, you can store it underneath something. The smaller profile makes these easier to store away and transport, and then the post you can just chuck in your toolbox or whatever you know, haul away stuff in, and it makes transport and storage so much easier. That's the kind of thing I talk about when I'm talking about well thought out products. So again, these are the Woodcraft Technologies rear stand and front stand. If you're looking for something just to get your bike in the air and you want to do it right the first time, these are a good option for you.